Good evening. Tonight, 4 quiet neighborhoods, 4 different kinds of plans, and one simple truth. The dead don't keep secrets, but the living try. A gravel loop where the dogs didn't bark. A Brooklyn foyer where spilled milk mapped 3 gunshots. A campus streetlight that watched a car door open and never closed its eyes. An ER where a newborn arrived without a mother, and a refusal told detectives what the paperwork wouldn't. If you like long-form true crime told softly and with care, please subscribe, tap like, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing the map light up. This episode is inspired by real investigative patterns and public case dynamics. Names, places, and sequences are fictionalized for clarity and privacy. Headphones on, lights low, let's begin. At 6:58 a.m., a phone line clicks open. You can hear a woman breathing through her hands, as if warmth could protect her from what she has already seen. "There's blood," she says. "It's all over the house. My brother-in-law is in the bedroom. He's not moving. Please, just send someone. Now." "Mom, are you safe?" the dispatcher asks. "Are you inside?" "I drove over to feed the animals," she says, voice shaking. "It looks like they're dead." The county is Ashbrook. The road is Raven Hollow. 3 trailers and a gravel loop tucked into the trees. The dogs that bark at every stranger are not barking. House 1 sits under a sickle of shade, aluminum siding dulled to the color of old coins. Inside the living room lies Christopher Mason, 42. Broad shoulders, grease under the nails. The kind of man who can fix a starter motor and a fence on the same afternoon. He is on his side, as if someone tried to fold sleep back over him like a blanket. Later, forensics will call it close range. They will count 9 shots, 5 to head and face, 3 to the torso, 1 across the arm. The kind of wound a body collects when instinct reaches for life even as it slips away. Down the small hallway, in a room that smells like laundry powder and cedar chips, lies Gary, Christopher's cousin, 2 to the temple. A 3rd so close to the skin it leaves a dark ring. He may never have woken. Or if he did, he didn't wake for long. On the porch, 2 pit bulls sit side by side, eyes steady. Dogs that usually announce a mail truck like a parade. Say nothing. Outside, a pickup crunches gravel. It's Bobby Lane, sister-in-law to the family, shaking so hard it turns keys into marbles. She calls her brother. He doesn't answer. She dials 911. The county begins to move. House 2 is 15 steps away across a path of flattened crabgrass. Inside, Frankie Mason, Christopher's eldest, and Hannah Gilly, his fiancée. Between them, a 4-month-old baby, warm in a universe gone cold. On the carpet by the bed, their 3-year-old sleeps, one hand wrapped around a toy sword that is really a stuffed animal, as if courage could be stitched. Frankie takes 3 to the head and face. Hannah, 1 through the eye, and 4 more to make certain morning never finds her again. Whoever came here knew exactly what they meant to do. They did not hurry. They did not leave a mess they didn't intend. In the kitchen, a white mug waits with a teaspoon inside. Sugar has crystallized along the rim. It never had time to dissolve. House 3 belongs to Dana Mason, Christopher's ex-wife. She lives there with Chris Jr., 16, and Hannah Mae, 19, 4 days postpartum. The narrow hallway smells like disinfectant, baby powder, and gasoline. It is a smell you never forget once your body has filed it away. Dana, 5 to the head, two so close the skin cannot decide if it is wound or stamp. Chris Jr., two from above, sharp entries that suggest a shooter who knew exactly where he was standing and how quickly the room would end. Hannah May, two fatal shots where the bedding still smells like a nursery. The newborn is alive, mouth working in small searching rhythms. A tiny miracle in the middle of a scene that used up the word unthinkable and kept going. Sophia, Hannah's 2-year-old, is safe. She spent the night with her father elsewhere. No ledger can account for that. In Ashbrook, they say, some children get tucked into God's pocket. Sometimes that is the only explanation any of us can carry. By mid-morning, a cousin worries about Kenneth Mason, Christopher's brother, who lives 5 miles down a different road. He calls. No answer. He drives, flanked by 2 friends who don't speak much when they're scared. Kenneth's door is unlocked. He is in bed, 1 shot, close, straight through the eye. His shoes are neatly beside the bed. A folded shirt waits on a chair for a morning that never arrived. 8 dead. 3 small children intentionally left alive. 4 homes. 1 family. Dismantled the way a mechanic can take apart an engine and return the pieces to the tray. Investigators arrive to find something that feels like a locked room puzzle staged across a landscape. There are no shell casings. Neighbors report no gunshots. The cell phones belonging to the adults are gone. Wallets, televisions, jewelry, untouched. Even the dogs stay quiet. They knew the visitor, one deputy says, and nobody tells him to stop guessing, because in the absence of answers, guesses are how a heart keeps moving. Forensics will talk about quiet firearms, .22 caliber and suppressors, and devices that catch spent casings before they bounce across linoleum. They will talk about someone who knows the exact shape of a room in the dark. They will say the words careful and deliberate, and the room will get smaller every time they speak. Rumors move faster than official reports. Someone mentions a grow room behind a barn, a string of gamecocks that don't look like pets. Someone else says cartel, then cornbread mafia, then a name borrowed from a documentary, and dragged across a county line like proof. But the pieces at Raven Hollow don't look like an army arriving from a highway. They look like family, standing ankle deep in its own shadow. 2 names matter in Ashbrook, the Masons and the Whitakers. Jake Whitaker, son of Billy Whitaker, meets Hannah Mae Mason at the Ashbrook County Fair. She is 13. He is almost 18. It starts with baby rabbits in a wire pen and a boy who speaks quietly, as if volume could make him guilty. Chris Mason Sr., Hannah's father, allows the relationship, with conditions. Never alone, always a chaperone. On paper, it reads like caution. In practice, it becomes a rope. 2 families with different rules, tied together by a baby girl named Sophia. Time moves, love sours, arguments repeat. The kind of control that calls itself care tightens around Hannah's life until the room feels smaller than her breath. Then one day, in a private post she believes is safe, Hannah writes what she feels. She will never give Sophia up, not to Jake, not to his family, even if it costs her life. She does not know Angela Whitaker, Jake's mother, can read her messages. Hannah meets another man. The relationship is short. It ends in a second pregnancy. To the Whitakers, this is not just heartbreak. It is a problem. In a house where choices happen at a kitchen table and are called votes, the numbers begin to add up. There is a night when the Whitakers sit at that table, Billy at the head, Jake and George on either side, Angela with a notepad, Family sounds like ceremony until it isn't. Who has to be gone? Billy asks quietly. For Sophia to stay. It is not a sudden question. It has been circling the room for months. What follows is the kind of preparation that looks ordinary until you line the receipts up side by side. The kind of practice you only recognize when you find the trees later and count the scars in their bark. The kind of paperwork that looks like protection until you measure the signature and learn how hard someone tried to be someone else. We will not detail the shopping list. It is enough to say this. Care went into what happened, the kind of care you hope people reserve for good things. 4 days after Hannah May comes home from the hospital, Sophia goes to stay with the Whitakers for a couple of nights. At the Mason trailers, dinner knives are drying on a towel. Billy messages Chris Mason Sr. about a job. It is a word that covers many sins in a county that prefers verbs. When Billy steps into the first trailer, Jake and George wait at the tree line in a truck whose engine idles the way grief does. Low, constant, almost polite. What follows is a walk you don't learn, but become. Home to home, door to door, closed doors, open triggers. Pause at a crib and do not touch the child. Drive 5 miles. Stop at Kenneth's. 1 shot. 1 more light removed from the county's night. At 2:35 a.m., a tricycle driver on a road with a different name, there is always a different name, sees 2 headlamps flare and then vanish. He wonders if he imagined it. Later, it will become a 3-line paragraph in a report. Sometimes that is what a life's work looks like. After the night comes the cleanup, the quiet choreography of how a crime disappears. A vehicle is parked where it doesn't usually sit. Clothing vanishes in a burn barrel that used to smoke only leaves. A lake receives something heavy and does not splash loudly enough to be remembered. Someone throws away floor mats. Someone else gathers phones in a plastic bag like a strange harvest. And in front of neighbors, a family does the performance everyone expects. Shock, sadness, a refusal to understand. Then the Whitakers move to Alaska. Alaska is the kind of word that swallows conversation. You say it when you want to end a topic without sounding like you're ending it. The map looks far enough away to feel like an answer. A year later, the Whitakers come back. Jake has a new wife. The whole clan goes to work at a local trucking company. They wave at people who used to avoid them. They show up where they didn't before. Sometimes normal is a disguise people sew together out of daylight and repetition. And then, 2 women orbiting the household leave. One steps back into her mother's arms. The other moves in with a cousin 2 counties over. They take memories with them. They talk. Maybe to family. Maybe to a friend. Maybe to someone who knows how to listen without trying to fix the ending. After that, the case moves. Investigators hide recorders in work trucks. They tap phones. They talk to people in small rooms with square lights. They collect handwriting that looks too much like Hannah May's to be hers. In a stand of trees behind the Whitaker property, they find burned fragments of something that once made a firearm quiet. When the press conference comes, it arrives with all the choreography of government. A seal on a blue curtain. A podium that smells like furniture polish. Camera shutters like insects. Today is that day, the official says. The names are George Billy, Whitaker III, Angela Whitaker, George Whitaker IV, Edward Jake Whitaker. Charges: multiple counts of aggravated murder, conspiracy, forgery, obstruction. Words with edges arranged in a line. 2 years into pre-trial custody, Jake Whitaker speaks. Not because truth is beautiful, because death is a lever and someone offered him a different weight to hold. He confesses. He says he personally pulled the trigger 5 times. The rest, his father, his brother. His mother did not go to the scenes, he says, but she was central to planning, to covering, to paperwork that would have handed a child to a family that had just taken a night from a county. Evidence begins to stand up and answer to its name. Messages from that night line up with a meeting at a kitchen table. Fragments found in the woods match the kind of things quiet guns wear. A lake gives up something heavy, and inside it is metal that speaks the way only metal speaks in a lab. Receipts align with a calendar nobody wants to own. A signature repeats until it looks too perfect to be anyone's real hand. Prosecutors map the night in minutes. Detectives in ash-colored suits point at photos pinned to foam board. A jury watches rumor become transcript. The sentences are long and clean. Jake Whittaker, life in prison, with parole eligibility, after 32 years, in exchange for a full confession and testimony. No death penalty. Angela Whittaker, 30 years for conspiracy and cover. George Whittaker IV, 8 consecutive life terms without parole. He went to trial, refused to plead, and the law answered without any softening at the edges. George Billy Whittaker III, the patriarch, faces his own day under lights. In some counties they call that justice. In others they call it a start. Each sentence is a period that wants to be a stop sign. In Ashbrook, stops are suggestions. Grief has its own intersections. If you want to understand why the story hangs together, look at the children. Children are the hinge on which the night turns. The spared children fit a motive, not mercy. The quiet weapons and missing shells fit the method, not magic. The phones that vanished suggest someone wanted to carry the night away in their pocket. The move to Alaska, the return, the attempt at normal. That's choreography, not coincidence. There were 3 children alive at sunrise who did not know they were supposed to die. One of them carries the name Sophia like a candle in a jar. One day she will learn that people wanted her so badly they killed everything around her. And other people wanted her so badly they hid her for one night in a safer room. In Ashbrook, they say, you dose the truth. You spoon it out in ways a child can carry. You don't drown them in it. You do not build a life out of a tidal wave. A year later, I go back to Raven Hollow. Gravel remembers every tire. Bobby Lane stands on a porch, beneath a newly installed motion light. I learned to turn the light on before I open a door, she says. She tells me the dogs are good animals. They do their jobs, she says, and her mouth tries to smile. That night, maybe they did it differently. In the hallway, a calendar shows St. Michael with a sword. A small rosary hangs beside it, beads smoothed by fingers that learned to pray after they learned to hold. On the living room carpet, toy cars sit in a neat row, all facing the same direction. A traffic jam waiting for a hand that will never come back to push. This is a county of work boots and straight talk. People wear justice like denim, every day, not only in a courtroom. They hammer things into shape because that is how you keep a place standing. This was not an army from a highway. It was a kitchen table. It was not random. It was a custody war fought with terrible weapons. The dogs did not announce a stranger. They recognized a habit. The children were spared not by compassion, but by a plan. If the law can write a lesson from all this, it is both simple and impossible. In places where family is a fortress, it can also be a siege. 8 doors, 3 spared children. A kitchen table that planned what a highway never would. Ashbrook learned to sleep again, but never the way it did before. Up next, when love turns into a ledger and a front door becomes a finish line. Welcome to Story 2, Ledger at the Door. Brooklyn, February. A black sedan, unplugged cameras, and a claim form faxed too fast. Lights low. It is a February afternoon in Brooklyn. Grey sky, salt on the sidewalks, grocery bags double knotted against the cold. On Bergen Avenue, a man parks his black sedan beside a hydrant, kills the engine, and lifts 2 paper bags from the passenger seat. His name is Marcus Rowe. He is 36, a union iron worker with shoulders that tell you what a decade of steel feels like. He has a wife upstairs, a 7-month-old daughter asleep in a blanket the color of peaches, and a list of small errands on a note folded in his pocket. The foyer door clicks shut behind him. 2 steps up. 3. He balances the weight of milk, formula, a pack of paper towels crooking into his wrist. Then, 3 quick pops. Neighbors will later argue about what they heard. Fireworks, a car backfiring, not gunshots, not at that hour, not here, not Marcus. The bags tumble. The milk bursts white across old tiles. Marcus slumps against the newel post and slides to the floor, hands reaching for a wound that doesn't negotiate. On the 2nd floor, a phone comes to life. "There's someone in my house," a woman whispers. "I heard loud popping noises. I'm in the bedroom. The door is locked. I'm alone with the baby." Her name is Alicia Rowe. "Stay where you are," the dispatcher says. "Officers are on the way. Is anyone injured?" "My husband," she says. "He just came home. I think he's down there." Her voice does not break. Not yet. Sirens learn the route to Bergen Avenue in under 4 minutes. Paramedics climb the stairs through spilled milk and groceries scattered like a parade that forgot what it was celebrating. They work while the hallway squeezes smaller and smaller around them. Marcus is wheeled into the light and taken away. He does not come back. News travels on foot in this building. Someone texts someone else. Doors open. A neighbor puts a hand on Alicia's shoulder, and it hovers there, unsure if contact is permitted in rooms like this. A detective in a navy pea coat arrives with a notebook he will fill completely before midnight. His name is Detective David Santana. He surveys the foyer. The 3 tight rounds punched center mass. The angle of approach that says the shooter stood close enough to smell laundry soap. "Home invasion," someone says. "Maybe," Santana replies. "Maybe not." In the Rowe apartment, he notes 3 small black domes mounted high in the corners of the living room. Cameras, a DVR hub in the hallway cabinet. None of it glowing. Wires hang cleanly unplugged, wound into a polite loop. "Do you usually keep these on?" he asks. "They were on when we moved in," Alicia says. "Marcus insisted." "And today?" "I don't know," she says. "I was upstairs with the baby. I heard the pops. I called you." She is wrapped in a grey robe. Her hair is pulled back. The baby sleeps. Santana studies the entry door. There are no pry marks, no kicked panel, no sliver of wood shaved by panic. If someone came to take what wasn't theirs, they brought a key, or they were let in. Downstairs, CSU dust the banister. They bag a pair of shell fragments. They swab door handles, collect footprints, photograph the milk, the groceries, the red. Then they run an inventory. Marcus kept a small safe in the bedroom closet. He had a pistol registered, kept for protection. The safe is open. The space where the pistol sits is empty. Santana writes a note beside this detail and underlines it twice. By evening, the Rowe family gathers in a small kitchen in East Flatbush. Marcus's mother, Yvonne, places a stack of photographs on the table, like a deck that might produce a better card if you keep shuffling. Marcus at 6, missing 2 teeth, front wheel off a bicycle in midair. Marcus at 19, hard hat crooked back, hands on his hips, steel behind him like a horizon. Marcus at his wedding, a smile that makes other people smile. He took care of everybody, Yvonne says. You needed help moving. He was there. You needed rent. He'd figure it out. He wasn't perfect, but he was good. Any trouble? Santana asked gently. Anyone with a reason. People have reasons you don't see coming, Yvonne says. She lifts her eyes and holds them steady. But it wasn't a stranger. Why not? Because the dogs didn't bark, she says, then almost smiles. We don't have dogs, but it still feels true. Marcus and Alicia met after Marcus's divorce. They were neighbors whose paths crossed at the mailboxes and in the laundry room. Alicia worked as a home health aide. She carried a quiet air that Marcus read as calm and control that he mistook for care. They married within a year. A small ceremony at a restaurant with red tablecloths and a ceiling fan that squeaked. A honeymoon weekend upstate by a lake that promised more summers. A daughter, Amaya, 7 months ago. Marcus built her crib himself, then rebuilt it after watching a video about crib safety at 2 a.m. He kept receipts for everything. He also kept the heat on, the car running, the insurance current, the mortgage on the condo. That one he kept at arm's length. There were notices, there were fees, there was a word the bank liked to use: foreclosure. It floated like a cloud that refused to leave even on blue sky days. Alicia liked nice things, designer bags, shoes lined in a row like a parade, a phone that came in a white box with a ribbon, trips that looked better on a screen than they felt when the credit card statement arrived. Friends said they were happy. Marcus's sister, Tasha, said she saw hairline cracks no one else wanted to notice. She could be particular, Tasha says, when Santana asks. It had to be her way. And the cameras, Santana asks. Marcus put those in, Tasha says. Said, it's Brooklyn. We'd be stupid not to. He showed me how to check the app. If he forgot to lock up, he could pop in and see. He liked that. Did Alicia like that? Tasha shrugs. I don't know what Alicia liked, except the bags. Day 2. Santana and his partner, Detective Brennan, walk the block. They pull footage from a deli across the street, a laundromat, a nail salon, a semicircle of small lives that happen to point cameras toward the same slice of sidewalk. At 12:43 p.m., a black sedan idles at the corner. The passenger steps out, hood up, hands in pockets. He walks into the building. At 12:56 p.m., Marcus pulls up. He enters. At 12:58 p.m., the hooded man emerges and walks quickly the other way. The sedan slides into traffic and is gone. No license plate in frame, no face, just a shape, a height, A gait that tells Santana the man has moved like this before. Calculated, never hurried, always small. A shot of the black sedan turns up on a traffic camera 2 blocks away. The plate is obscured by grime. The driver makes an illegal U-turn. Someone did their homework, Brennan says. Someone had help, Santana replies. There are details that don't stay buried. In one of Alicia's purses, investigators find a folded letter from an insurance company. On the computer, they find 3 more. Life insurance policies carried by Marcus. 1 through the union, 1 private. 1 small accidental death rider neither of them ever read. Together, they total $900,000. The named beneficiary, Alicia Rowe. There is nothing illegal about life insurance. It is what you do when you love people. It is the grammar of adulthood. But some numbers ask to be read twice when the body that kept them breathing is 3 days gone. When Santana asks about the policies, Alicia nods. Marcus did all that, she says. Said it was the responsible thing. Did you ever discuss the amount? He told me not to worry about it, she says. He wanted us to be safe. These are words that mean one thing in a kitchen on a Tuesday and another thing entirely in an interview room under a fluorescent bulb. 4 days after the shooting, an adjuster from Heritage Life calls Detective Santana. He asks if the police have a suspect. He asks if the manner of death might delay disbursement. He asks if he should put a hold on the claim that arrived by fax the morning after Marcus died. By fax. Santana thanks him for the call. He asks for a copy of the claim. The signature at the bottom reads A. Rowe. People grieve in different ways, Brennan says when the line goes dead. Some people account, Santana replies. At week's end, the case seems both heavy and light. Heavy with grief and rumour, light on proof. Then a small corner turns. A call from a pharmacist in Bedford-Stuyvesant. A man who works weekends in the back remembers a customer named Alicia, who picks up prescriptions for an elderly client. He mentions that she sometimes lingers near the vitamin aisle, near the shelf with the cheap phone chargers, near the young man who stocks it. What's the young man's name? Santana asks. Damon Ellis, the pharmacist says. Nice kid, always on time. Ellis lives with his cousin on Quincy Street. He has a smile that apologizes for taking up space. He lets the detectives into a small apartment that smells like garlic and warm laundry. How long have you known Alicia? Santana asks. A few months, Ellis says. She'd come in, we'd talk. It just happened. What happened? We were seeing each other, he says, staring at his hands. She said her marriage was complicated. Did you ever go to her apartment? Yes, he says. When? When the baby was down for a nap, he says, a flush moving up his neck. Marcus was home sometimes, on the 2nd floor. We were on the 1st. It wasn't... I know how that sounds. Did Marcus know? Ellis shakes his head. Did Alicia ever ask you for something that felt outside the lines? Santana asks. Ellis hesitates. She asked me if I knew anyone who could take care of a problem, he says finally. I thought she meant a debt collector. I told her I didn't know anybody like that. She said she was joking. Then she wasn't. What else did she ask for? There is a long pause. She asked me to get a gun, he says. Santana does not write anything down for 10 seconds. The room seems to tilt and then right itself. Did you? He asks. She gave me one, Ellis says. Said it was Marcus's. Said it would be easier that way. Pieces that sat quietly on the table begin to click. The empty slot in Marcus's safe. The cameras unplugged. The black sedan idling. The 3 shots. The immediate insurance claim. Ellis keeps talking because sometimes there is relief even when you are drowning. She gave me money, he says. She said it was for a friend who could help. I gave the gun and the cash to a guy named Kirk, a friend of a friend. I didn't ask his last name. How much money? $3,500, he says. She said there would be more later. What did Kirk say he would do? He said he would take care of it, Ellis says. I didn't think, I knew what it meant, but I thought it wouldn't happen. People say things they don't mean. People mean the thing they pay for, Santana says quietly. The black sedan appears again, this time on a camera outside a pawn shop on Nostrand. The plate is cleaner here. The number is legible. It belongs to a rental registered to a woman in Brownsville who says she lent it to her cousin, who lent it to a friend who doesn't answer his phone. The friend's name, Kirk Portis. When officers find Portis on a stoop in East New York, he has a new phone, a thin jacket, and an expression that says he knows the order these events will take. He denies everything for 30 minutes. Then he doesn't. Yeah, he says, eyes on the floor. I went in. He came in with groceries. I did what I was paid to do. I walked out. He says the gun was small. He says the hallway smelled like milk and bleach. He says he threw the gun in the river. He says his life has been a long series of doors, and this one was just another. Who paid you? Santana asks. Alicia's boy, he says. The pharmacy kid. Did you meet Alicia? Portis shakes his head. Didn't need to, he says. Money is the only introduction I use. Alicia is arrested on a Friday afternoon. She is leaving the condo with a diaper bag and a list. She does not resist. She does not ask for a coat. She does not ask to make a call. At the precinct, she narrows her world to the 2 feet of table in front of her and places her hands flat on it. Innocent, she says. I am innocent. Her lawyer meets her eyes and says nothing. The charges are heavy. Murder in the 1st degree, conspiracy, criminal possession of a weapon, solicitation. In the courtroom on Monday morning, the gallery is full. Marcus's mother sits with her hands knotted around a handkerchief that belonged to her own mother. Alicia's mother sits 2 rows back, lips pressed into a line that may be prayer or curse. The prosecutor lays out a story with the bland care of a doctor giving bad news. It is a story in which love is a rope pulled until it snaps. It is a story in which money grows teeth. He talks about debt. He talks about foreclosure notices. He talks about 3 life insurance policies totaling $900,000 that Alicia attempted to collect within 24 hours of Marcus's death. He talks about cameras unplugged. He talks about a safe left open. He talks about a registered pistol removed without permission. He talks about text messages in which Alicia asks Ellis for a favor, and Ellis replies that he has a guy. He talks about a call the morning of the murder, a call that pings cell towers near Alicia's building, then near the pawn shop, then near the scene again. He plays the 911 recording. There's someone in my house, Alicia says on the tape. I heard popping noises. I'm in the bedroom with the baby. In the tape, you can hear nothing of the foyer below. You can only hear a heartbeat in the silence between words and the soft hush of a baby breathing. The defense calls Alicia a bad wife, not a murderer. They call Ellis a liar. They say Marcus and Alicia argued like people argue and loved like people love. They say that the cameras were unplugged because the previous night the DVR had chirped and the noise bothered the baby. They say the safe's key went missing and Marcus himself sometimes left it open. They say that people are messy and grief is a tenderizer and the state is cruel. They say Portis is a criminal you cannot trust and Ellis is a coward looking for a smaller cell. They say Alicia is a mother. They say a lot of things. The jury listens. They take notes in tidy handwriting. They go home each night to their own tables and wonder what is owed to whom and whether security and love are ever really the same word. A story like this doesn't turn on one piece of evidence. It turns on a drift of them, tiny, sharp, cumulative. A timestamp on a street camera that places a black sedan exactly where it shouldn't be. A deposit made in cash at a bank branch 2 days after the murder by a man who never had cash to deposit before. A smudge on the inside of a safe door that yields DNA that isn't Marcus's and isn't Alicia's and makes Ellis's face go white when the lab report arrives. A claim form faxed to an insurer before the medical examiner had signed a death certificate. A Google search on Alicia's laptop asking if insurance pays out on homicide. A neighbor says she saw Alicia on the stairs the day before with a bundle of cables and a look that made the neighbor take a step back. A text from Alicia to Ellis reads, "Do not text about this." A text from Ellis to Portis reads, "Today." A text from Portis to a number that doesn't work anymore reads, "Done." When the verdict comes, it is fast. 3 hours. The jury files in. No eye contact. The foreperson stands. "Guilty," he says. A sound moves through the courtroom that is not a cheer and not a sob. Relief makes strange music. Kirk Portis receives life. Damon Ellis takes a deal, 15 years to life, in exchange for testimony that stings to hear even when you already knew what he would say. Alicia Rowe is sentenced to life without parole. Her lawyer says they will appeal. She says she is innocent. The judge says words about trust and the reckoning of small decisions that teach themselves to add up. Outside, the sky is the same grey it was when the shots were fired. The salt lines on the sidewalks haven't moved. It is winter still. At Marcus's funeral, Yvonne stands beside a wooden box that costs more than she is willing to tell anyone. Beneath her fingertips, the polish is cold. Alicia comes through the line of mourners. She wears black that fits perfectly and a face that does not change. She reaches for Yvonne's hand. Yvonne does not take it. "You had choices," she says quietly. "My son had one." Later, by the grave, Yvonne says something else that sticks to the air. "Why not divorce?" she says to no one and everyone. "Why not tell the truth and walk away? Why turn a house into a graveyard when a lawyer would have done?" Nobody answers. There is a shovel. There is dirt. There is the complicated business of lowering a man into the ground while the city keeps moving around him, as if nothing is happening at all. Time does what time does. It carries people forward whether they are ready or not. Amaya learns to walk. She learns to say Dada, because that is how babies understand ghosts. On a certain morning in May, she toddles into the kitchen, lifts her arms, and the entire room chokes on a picture of Marcus doing the same when he was small. Yvonne takes Amaya to the park. She wears comfortable shoes and the kind of smile that hurts. Detective Santana files the case. He knows there are more like it. There are always more. He tells himself that justice is a habit, not a holiday. He tells himself that doing the work quietly is the only way it gets done. Sometimes, on his way home, he passes Bergen Avenue and slows down, as if the street could still be taught a kinder story. People will argue about why Alicia did what she did. They will use words like greed and survival and narcissism. They will say Marcus should have seen it. They will say Alicia should have left. They will say Ellis should have run. They will say Portis should have said no. They will say the detective got lucky. They will say the jury got it wrong. People will say a lot of things because saying things is how we test the bars of our own cages. But some fact do not ask for commentary. A man went to the store for milk and formula and paper towels. He came home. He set his shoulder against the door because that's what doors require. He died before he could drop his keys in the bowl by the radiator. 3 shots, an open safe, a black rental, and a number with too many zeros. Some marriages end in court. This one ended in the foyer. Up next, a campus where porch lights glow, a study break that never ends, and an ATM that remembers what faces forget. Welcome to Story 3, Midnight Study Break, Bridgefield, March. A saved document at 3:28 a.m., a missing hatchback, and a timeline with corners that need sanding. She said she would stay home and study. It was a Wednesday that felt like spring had finally remembered how to be warm again. Her roommates put on jackets, then left them hanging on chairs. Nobody thought they would be out long enough to need them. They called to her from the hall, "Come with us. It's only a few blocks, just an hour." She smiled, shook her head, and lifted a notebook in a little wave. "Quiz tomorrow," she said. "Have fun." At 4:30 in the morning, her friends came back to her front door, standing wide open. The lights inside were still on. The coffee mug near her laptop had cooled into a skin. Her car was gone. And by then, in a quiet neighborhood a mile away, someone had heard 3 shots and a scream. This is the story of Ava Winslow, a 22-year-old student leader at the University of Bridgefield, a campus that liked to call itself a small town with better libraries. Ava's week was a postcard of ambition, a double major in biology and public policy, morning research lab, night mentoring at a community center, weekends planning a health equity fair. If you looked at her calendar, there were no blank spaces. The margin notes had their own margin notes. On paper, at least, nothing about that Wednesday should have been different. Background. Ava grew up in Riverton, a 3-hour drive from campus, with parents who taught her that good days are made, not found. In high school, she was the kind of student who filled out forms for other students because bureaucracy felt like an obstacle course someone forgot to design for kindness. She volunteered at a shelter on Thursdays and a nursing home on Sundays, and insisted both were the highlight of her week for different reasons. At Bridgefield, she won a scholarship that paid for more than tuition. It bought her time, Time to start the Campus Service Coalition. Time to lead a science outreach program in elementary schools. Time to leave the country twice. Once to Ecuador with a mobile clinic. Once to Egypt with a research team that came back with sunburns and papers that took 3 months to understand completely. Her friends would tell you Ava collected people the way some people collect vinyl, carefully, with reverence for the stories pressed into them. She had a way of making introductions that felt like she was giving 2 people back a piece of themselves they hadn't realized they dropped. Senior Spring had a job offer at the end of it, waiting like a light in a hallway. She'd already said yes. She had an apartment off campus with 3 friends who loved the same coffee shop and argued over the same playlist and shared a calendar on the fridge that made their life look like a cooperative art project. On March 5th, the calendar said, midterm review, community clinic, quick dinner, study, disappearance. At 1:30 a.m., the apartment door closed behind, laughing, whispering, because you whisper in hallways at that hour, even if no one has asked you to. The roommates went to a party 10 blocks in the other direction. Ava's room door stayed open. Her desk lamp stayed on. She had a habit of keeping the apartment a little too bright, as if she could coax the morning in early with wattage. Her laptop shows a document saved at 3:28 a.m. The activity log, later pulled by a forensic technician, shows a lull and then a burst. Notes renumbered, a paragraph replaced, a citation fixed. It is the kind of granular rhythm that means she was alone and focused, and about to tell herself she'd earned 5 hours of sleep if she could convince her brain to stop multiplying. At 4:31 a.m., the roommates arrived home. The front door was open. The living room lights were on. Ava wasn't there. Her phone wasn't on the coffee table. Her keys weren't in the bowl by the door. The lock plate had a fresh scratch that might have been there the day before. It is hard to know, after the fact, how much of the world you failed to notice when you were still allowed to believe it was safe. They called her, no answer. They texted. One red notification, then silence. Have you ever tried not to panic by lowering your voice? The apartment sounded like that. They told themselves an explanation would arrive alongside her. Study group, a ride to the library, a favor for a friend. They checked her room, her desk, the tiny balcony where she liked to take 5-minute phone calls and let the night air do the thinking for her. On her desk, the notebook with the quiz outline. In the sink, the coffee mug. In the entryway, an absence where her shoes usually waited. At 5:02 a.m., a woman on Sycamore Lane called 911. She was awake because her dog had insisted the night needed to be checked again. She heard what she thought were fireworks and then remembered the calendar said March, not July. She heard a scream, sharp and short, the kind you don't admit to remembering because admitting means admitting there was time for you to move and you didn't. She went to her window and saw a car peel away so fast it forgot it had to turn. She said she didn't see the driver's face. She said the brake lights looked like eyes blinking too hard. Responding officers found a young woman lying near the curb. No phone, no wallet, no ID, nothing to hold up to a camera and say, "We have a name." The officers did not say the thing they were thinking. They called for EMS, and they did the motions their training has taught them, even when the training knows, before the mouth does, that the motions will not be enough. Identification. At 9 in the morning, One of Ava's roommates drove to the police station. She told the desk sergeant her friend was missing. She told the sergeant her friend's car, an older hatchback that made an admirable noise only sometimes, was gone. She told the sergeant that the door was open, and that wasn't like her, and the lights were on, and that wasn't like her, and her phone was off, and that wasn't like anyone. The detective on duty, Daniel Rios, listened and took notes, and then said a sentence so gently it arrived like a parenthesis. There had been a report before dawn, he said, and a body had been found. And did she think she could look at a photo just to rule something out? She knew before the photograph was fully turned. She knew by the angle of a wrist and the way hair finds a way to frame a face even when no one thinks about hair. She nodded twice, small nods that meant both yes and no. And then she took a breath like someone learning to swim, not because they wanted to, but because the opposite had stopped being an option. The apartment became a scene. The campus became a rumor. The university sent an email with words like tragedy and support services and counselors available. Students printed her photo and taped it in clusters on bulletin boards where comedy night ads and tutoring flyers looked suddenly absurd. Investigation. The first hours. Detective Rios is not the kind of investigator who makes speeches to himself. He likes lists. He likes that lists can be wrong and still make you feel like you're moving. His first list is simple. Timeline, property, devices, vehicle. Timeline. Roommates last saw Ava at 1:30. Laptop activity through 3:28. Body discovered around 5. A gap big enough to move through without bumping the furniture. Property. Car missing, keys missing, wallet missing, phone missing. Jewelry still on Ava's wrist and neck. The quick estimate. This was not a headlong ransacking. It was something leaner. Devices. Laptop on the desk, still logged in. Phone not found. Roommate messages unanswered since 3:40. Router logs show a clean disconnect around 3:35, consistent with someone leaving with the phone in hand. Vehicle. An alert goes out to patrols in neighboring towns. Within hours, a county unit reports a car matching Ava's parked on the edge of a small apartment complex. Not hidden exactly, just left. The car is towed to a secure bay. Forensics goes to work. You can learn a lot from a car, if it wants to tell you. You can also learn how well someone knew what evidence looks like. ATM trail. At 3:46 a.m., 18 minutes after her last saved document, Ava's debit card is used at a cash machine 6 miles from the apartment. 2 withdrawals for $350 each. The bank's daily cap. 10 minutes apart. The card's PIN was entered correctly the first time. Detective Rios requests the footage. Many machines no longer keep tapes in the way TV shows want them to. This one does. The camera mounted above the screen catches reflections. It catches a face. It catches the inside of Ava's car. The dash beads she hung ironically, because they made the car look like it was pretending to be cooler than it was. A man sits in the driver's seat. A second shape occupies the back seat, blurred by distance and angle. The man's head is turned. He looks toward the lens as he presses the buttons, the way people glance at mirrors without meaning to. The image is too grainy to print and say, "This is." It is clear enough to print and say, "This could be." Detective Rios circles the shape in the back seat. He doesn't write the word. He doesn't have to. Everyone who sees the still sees the word anyway. Ava. The card is used at 2 more machines over the next days, declines when the cap resets fail because a fraud flag has bloomed in the bank system. One of the machines points at a wall. One points at a carpet. One points at the perfect angle to catch the floor and nothing the floor has to say. It isn't until March 7th, just after midnight, that a convenience store camera in a neighboring town catches a different man trying to use the card. Different. Not the driver from the first video. He stands in the spill of a neon sign and keeps a hood up under a cap. He's not cautious. He's practiced. The clerk remembers him mostly because he didn't buy anything after the card failed. People who come in at that hour buy something, even if it's just a stick of gum they pretend they wanted. Focusing the suspect pool. Rios releases the images to the public, not all, just enough. He doesn't believe in flooding a city with fear. He believes in specific streets and specific eyes. The tip line lights up. Most tips are wrong. Many are well-meaning. 2 are the same name said in 2 very different voices. Darius Ansel, 21, a record longer than the years most people get to remember well. Robbery, assault, narcotics, bond, violation, bond again. His last court date was the week before. He did not show. A bench warrant waits like a forgotten appointment. Darius lives not far from the convenience store. When officers knock, his cousin answers. Darius is not home, she says. He was earlier, she says. She doesn't know where he went, she says. There's a hairline crack in her voice when she says the last part. The crack that means, don't search, because I don't want to watch you find something. He's picked up the next day at a friend's apartment, where a borrowed television has been left on for company, and 2 takeout cartons have become an index of 2 days. One empty, one half eaten, both cold. At the station, he says he doesn't know the girl. He says he doesn't know the card. He says he looks like a lot of people. He says no one can say for sure who anyone is on a screen like that. Rios asks about the man in the first ATM tape, the one in Ava's car. Could be anybody, Darius says. He folds in his chair slightly, an angle the experienced learn to recognize as calculation. What do they have? What do they want? What happens if I leave? What happens if I stay? Phone records. A warrant pulls Darius's phone logs. In the hours bracketing Ava's disappearance, his phone pings towers within a mile of her neighborhood. Not where he lives, not where he sleeps. It brushes against a tower near the first ATM. It falls silent for an hour and 13 minutes, then returns near the convenience store where he's captured on camera. He exchanged 26 messages between 2 and 4 a.m. with a contact saved as L. The number belongs to Lance Lovell, 17, a kid who has been 17 for a very long time if you ask the county records. Probation periods, violations, second chances, a third chance with a supervisor who believed names are not destiny. The last text, before the camera, sees Ava's car. You home? The reply, where you at? Then nothing until the withdrawals. Arrest and escalation. When officers go to Lance's address, he refuses to open the door. Then he opens the door just enough to show he has no intention of using it properly. The patrol calls for additional units. A negotiator asks if there is anyone else inside. Lance says no, and then someone else coughs. The house is not large. The house acquiesces quickly. Lance is led out. He is indignant and 17 and extremely sure that the hallway the world has set him in will continue gently downward and deposit him in a place with snacks. At the station, Lance says he wasn't in Bridgefield that night. He says his phone lies a lot. He says he doesn't know Darius like that. His attorney arrives and looks at the tapes and looks at the printout of his client's mugshot, taken 2 months earlier after a different kind of convenience store attempt. He does not advise his client to keep talking. Building the case. You would be forgiven for thinking that the videos and the towers and the car and the timeline formed a perfect circle. They do not. They form a shape with corners that need sanding. The car yields fingerprints, many, most of them belonging to Ava and her friends, and a detailer she hired once before a road trip. The partials that could be new are smudged, not enough to say a name in a way a jury will listen to. There is a hair on the back seat that does not belong to Ava. It belongs perhaps to one of 100,000 people if you narrow it by color and length, and a profile that says male, in the way courts will call inconclusive. The card use tells the story regardless. Someone needed cash quickly. Someone knew the PIN or knew how to get it. Often that means a threat in a parking lot before the ride. Often it means, tell us and we will let you go. There was no sexual assault. The medical examiner says there were multiple gunshot wounds from 2 different weapons. 2 guns often means 2 people. It also often means someone wanted the story to be both decisive and anonymous. No single shooter, no clear signature. Rios pulls city traffic cameras. Near the apartment, 3 separate feeds capture a small car leaving the block around 3:36 a.m. Within minutes of that, a different camera sees a dark sedan shadowing without taillights on for half a block. Patterns make you feel like you know a thing you do not yet know how to name. He thinks, did Darius and Lance troll a campus neighborhood for a window with a light on and no other lights beside it? Ava's laptop, remember the save at 3:28, sits open as if waiting for her to come back from the kitchen. She did not leave a note. She did not take the charger. The browser remembers a tab with a reading on public health policy, and a tab with a recipe for something simple that feeds 4, and a tab with a music video whose chorus probably still lives in her roommate's muscles and will make them stop in supermarket aisles when it comes on for years. There is no message to explain the moment after 3:28 when something changed and the rest of the house changed shape around it. DA strategy. The district attorney reviews the file and knows the math prosecutors learn early. Juries prefer when a person says out loud the thing everyone suspects. You can convict without a confession. It is harder. It is slower. It makes people who came looking for catharsis leave with a verdict and not a feeling. The office tells Darius's attorney they will seek the death penalty if the case goes to trial on first-degree murder. The office tells Lance's attorney that being 17 does not make a thing untrue. It changes what the state is allowed to do in response. Darius asks to talk. He asks to talk after he doesn't ask to talk. People do that. They rehearse a version of the truth in their head and then decide to buy the state's offer when it sounds like the version they can live with. He will plead to avoid death. In exchange, he will say the thing out loud. Confession. He says they went looking for a mark. His word. He says Lance called him because he knew a neighborhood where students came and went like tidewater and sometimes forgot to close the door behind them. He says this with a shrug he tries to make look like regret. He says they saw Ava through a window. He says they made entry. He says she didn't scream. She asked what they wanted. They told her, the car, the cards, the pin. She said yes. She said okay. She said she would cooperate. They stayed long enough for fear to feel like a room with furniture in it. Then they left. Then the machine. Then the second machine. Then roads they did not know well, and a neighborhood they did not mean to choose, and a decision in a car where someone in the backseat cried, he says, and asked them to pray. She asked us to pray, he says. I remember that. He says he thought about it. He says he wanted to. He says, this is the moment where the court reporter's fingers hesitate because there are words coming that feel like they should not be written. He says he raised the gun instead. He says it plainly. He does not cry in the room. Outside the room, in court, at sentencing, he will turn to Ava's parents and say he is sorry, and say he knows. Sorry is not a word that does the work people pretend it does. He will receive life in prison, plus the extra years the law tacks on, as if arithmetic makes the wound respect the math. He will never leave. Lance goes to trial. The confession ties him to the night and the car and the street. The cell towers lock him near the apartment when he told the court he was home. The video stills with his head turned toward the lens from the driver's seat provide the image the jury will take into the room and turn over in their hands mentally until it becomes an object the mind can't put down without saying guilty. He is 17 the night Ava died. He will not be 17 again. He is sentenced to life. Later, he will appeal after a High Court ruling. Says juveniles cannot be locked away without the possibility of parole without specific findings. He will receive a new hearing. He will tell the judge everyone makes mistakes. He will say he is not a monster. He will say he has learned. He will not look at Ava's parents while he says it. The judge will talk about mercy and about time and about how the law must make space for the possibility of return, even if the facts make the imagination refuse the door. The judge will sentence him again to life with the possibility of parole after decades. Parole boards are not the same as time machines. Aftermath. On campus, there is a memorial garden. It is designed by a landscape architecture class that learned that semester how to measure grief in shade and light rather than in cubic yards of soil. There is a plaque with Ava's name and the words her roommate chose. She made the day longer in the best way. It is a sentence that sounds like someone invented a new scale for clocks. People leave notes under stones the way people have always done. When the only answer that seems suitable is to write a sentence and let the weather decide how long it stays. The university creates a scholarship in her name for students who do 3 things well: work, care, and refuse to treat those as separate categories. It is funded easily. People want to give money something to do when they cannot give it back the thing they wish it could buy. At the State House, a bill moves quickly in a way bills that have faces attached to them sometimes do. It increases penalties and investigative tools for organized robbery crews and gang-facilitated crimes. It pays for more cameras and better cameras and training for the people who review the images so that fewer of them point at carpet and fewer of them answer questions no one asked. It is not a law that stops the night from being the night. It is a law that makes it more expensive to mistake people for opportunities. Detective Rios keeps a copy of the first list he wrote. It's folded, soft at the creases. On the back, he wrote questions he cannot file. What details can you give back to a family that does not feel like a second theft? How do you write a report that tells the truth and leaves intact the story the family needs to carry into sleep? Ava's roommates leave the porch light on for a month. They do not agree about how long it should have stayed on. One says forever. One says until the day doesn't feel like it needs the light. One says until the bulb burns out, and then we will decide about the next bulb. They cook meals she would have approved of, nutritionally and narratively. They speak of her in present tense until it feels like a decision rather than a mistake. They graduate, they move. They keep the group chat name she made for them and never change it, even when it becomes the kind of name only 4 people will ever think is funny. They write, thinking of you, on days when the weather smells like that week did. They write, call me when you can, on other days. They do not say her name every time, but it is there anyway, inscribed in the negative space of all the times people who loved her built the day a little longer because that is what she taught them a day could hold. Epilogue. There is an urge at the end of a case like this to offer a lesson like a closing argument. Lock your doors. Don't study alone late. Walk with friends. Advice that rearranges the chessboard as if the pawns decide where the king goes. The truth is smaller and bigger than that. There are people who dramatize cruelty and call it a plan. There are people who speed past the part of the story where someone asks them to pray and shoot anyway. There are people who look at a campus neighborhood and see a menu. And there are people who spend their days making the edges of the world smoother for others and consider that a good use of time. Those people deserve narratives that do not require their heroism to be proven in the worst possible room. Ava did not fail to be safe. Other people failed to be human. The system that shuffled them through courtrooms and released them back into a night where porch lights mean someone is home also failed. Detective Rios goes home some nights and stands on his own porch and watches the light. Not because the light prevents anything. He knows better than anyone that light is sometimes just proof of an attempt. But because the light tells a truer story than the dark does in neighborhoods built on trust. 2 guns, 1 confession, and a list the detective kept folded soft at the creases. Ava didn't fail to be safe. Others failed to be human. Up next, an ER intake that doesn't add up, a funeral that arrives late, and a courtyard where 2 girls grew up on the same street. Welcome to Story 4, The Borrowed Baby. East Glen, a refusal in triage, a backlot search line, and a case that courts can decide but never cure. Background: 2 girls on the same street. They met in a courtyard where the grass never quite decided to grow. Taryn Hale and Janelle Turner lived 3 doors apart in East Glen, a working-class neighborhood stitched together by bus routes and corner stores. People who knew them as teenagers used the same 2 adjectives over and over: quiet and together. They didn't run with crowds. They ran with each other. Their lives were parallel lines that sometimes overlapped. Both became mothers at 16. Both drifted in and out of part-time jobs. Both learned too early what it meant to sit in waiting rooms where the clock moved differently. That's where the similarities started to end. Janelle steadied herself. She did the paperwork, the appointments, the classes that come after a hard conversation with a caseworker. She lost custody once, 1 bad month and 1 worse decision, but got it back, slow and meticulous. She taped a list to her fridge titled Next. Finish the GED, apply for community college, learn portrait photography, make the thing she loved pay a bill or two. In the evenings, she sat on a plastic crate outside her unit while her kids pedaled a second-hand green tractor in lopsided circles. When they got too brave, she cleared her throat and they came back in a heartbeat. That was the kind of gravity she had. Taryn didn't stabilize. By 14, her name had already appeared in precinct memos, stolen cards, shoplifting, a fire in the kitchen that everyone still argued about. At 19, there was an incident with her infant that an ER doctor would later call serious and unexplained. The state removed both daughters. Years later, after files were reviewed and classes completed, and a supervisor signed the box marked Reunify, the girls came home. For a while, it looked like Taryn had found a lane she could stay in. Then there was another arrest. Then another job lost. Through it all, the two women called each other sisters. They traded babysitting shifts. They watched bad TV. They reminded each other to drink water and not text people they'd regret texting. If the neighborhood had a story, it told itself about them. It was simple. The steady one and the struggling one still side by side. September 16th, the ER. At 2:03 a.m., Taryn walked into East Glen Community Hospital holding a baby wrapped in a towel in the color of a storm cloud. She told the triage nurse the child was hers, born prematurely in the park. The baby was not breathing. The covering physician, Dr. Chan, took the infant immediately. The team moved with practice, speed, and finality. Sometimes the body in your hands has already told its whole story. They called time of death after the protocols were exhausted. Then came the question that reset the room. Taryn, we need to examine you. She refused. Dr. Chan tried the soft reasons. It's for your safety. You could be hemorrhaging. You might not feel it yet. Taryn stared past him, arms folded tightly across a sweatshirt that had no stains on it, no tears, none of the signs the nurses knew to expect after a chaotic delivery. She said she'd been assaulted. Then she said she hadn't. Then she said the birth had happened too fast to remember. When the staff offered a social worker and a sexual assault advocate at the same time, she said she wanted neither. Because the ER is both a hospital and a record, the attending noted refused exam. Security copied the ID Taryn provided. It was hers. The baby was taken to the morgue. A chaplain said a prayer. The night, which had begun noisy, settled into the strange quiet that follows a decision everyone in the room knows is wrong and cannot legally override. 2 miles away, a row house apartment on Fletcher Court was dark. The absence. Janelle was 7 months pregnant, the kind of pregnancy that has a personality, steady kicks, heartburn that made her swear off orange juice, a name already chosen and written in the margin of a grocery list. She walked her oldest to the bus stop every morning. She tied her toddler's shoes into knots even she struggled to undo. She kept the baby on her hip like a punctuation mark. On the evening of the 15th, Taryn came by to watch the kids. It wasn't unusual. Janelle trusted her. She had, after all, trusted her for years. That night, neighbors noticed a small thing and did not file it under alarm. The light above Janelle's door, the one she kept on when the kids had a cold or she expected a late package, stayed off. In the morning, when Janelle didn't appear at the bus stop, another mother texted her. No reply. By lunchtime, a friend knocked. No answer. By late afternoon, Janelle's partner, Aaron, called the police to request a welfare check. The responding officers found the door locked and no signs of forced entry. From the hallway, everything looked normal. They logged the call as unable to make contact and moved to the next address on the list. Sometimes the first missing thing is the easiest to explain away. People misread it as a scheduling error. Worry hasn't had time to bloom fully yet. It would soon. The funeral that didn't want to happen. On the 21st, Taryn arranged a funeral for the baby she told everyone was hers. She named the infant Tessa Hale. The funeral home director would later struggle to describe the strangeness without sounding unkind. Taryn arrived 2 hours late. She asked if they could move the service so more family could attend, though only 2 relatives had been expected and 1 had already left. When the service finally began, the man beside her, Keith, a Navy reservist who believed he was the child's father, stood like someone braced against wind. He'd flown in on short notice. He had questions he didn't know how to ask. After the service, in a parking lot that smelled like cut grass and exhaust, Taryn spoke. The words were quiet and clumsy, as if she didn't know how much damage sound could do. She told Keith she hadn't gone into labor in a park. She said she had taken the baby from someone who didn't deserve her. She used a name, Janelle. Keith didn't finish the cigarette he had lit to buy himself time. He called 911. Whatever else he was feeling, grief, disbelief, the ache of being used, could sit in the passenger seat. The only useful thing to do now was speed. The first discovery. By sunset, a search team converged on the block where Taryn lived with her 2 daughters and her mother. Behind the property, a narrow lot gone to seed held its secrets in shoulder-high weeds. Detective Mara Ellison, the kind of investigator who would rather carry a shovel than a whiteboard, moved the search line forward in slow, methodical sweeps. They found Janelle less than 30 yards from Taryn's back fence. I won't linger on details. The medical examiner would later write that the injuries were consistent with homicidal violence in a domestic environment. A pair of utility scissors lay nearby, half hidden in dirt. A shower curtain had been used to drag the body. The point for our purposes is simple. Janelle didn't leave. She was left. Taryn was arrested that night. At first, her story wobbled. She had been assaulted. She had been pregnant herself. She had blacked out. She had been helping a stranger. None of it withstood the light of a follow-up question. Around midnight, with a public defender at her side and a tape recorder on the table, she began to talk. She placed herself in Janelle's bathroom. She described tape and panic and the decision that her words couldn't be undone once it was started. She did not use the word murder. People rarely do when they're still trying to remain the narrator of their own story. Detective Ellison stopped the interview. There was one question that mattered more than the sequence. Where are Janelle's children? Taryn blinked, and for the first time that evening, the room smelled like fear. The apartment revisited. The next morning, a new team returned to Fletcher Court with a warrant and a purpose. This time, the hallway didn't feel normal at all. The officers paused on the landing because a smell had stepped out to meet them. The kind of smell that rewrites a room before you've opened the door. They found Janelle's 3 children inside the apartment. 2 were in the washer. 1 was in the dryer. I promised I wouldn't go further than that, and I won't. The scene told investigators two things at once: that an impossible decision had been made in a bathroom, and that its momentum had been carried into a different room entirely. In the report, there is a paragraph that lists objects collected from the bathtub: a plastic cup, a bottle of children's cough syrup, a line of boats knocked onto the bath mat, as if by a small hand moving too fast. If you've ever wondered where police put their grief while they work, the answer is in paragraphs. They write carefully and quickly, so they can leave the room sooner. The why people ask for and don't receive. Motives are the stories we tell ourselves so that chaos feels like a plan. In Taryn's case, the threads braided into something like a narrative. She had told Keith she was pregnant. She wanted him to come home, to stay, to believe. When the weeks passed and no prenatal appointments materialized and no ultrasound photo appeared on a refrigerator, she shifted to a different performance. A neighbor saw her tuck a throw pillow under a hoodie on her way to the bus stop. A cousin remembered Taryn asking, in a voice meant to sound casual, whether people could tell the difference between a 7-month-old and a full-term newborn. Days before the ER, she purchased a bulb syringe, rubbing alcohol, and the kind of scissors you buy when you imagine you're preparing for a task you can't say out loud. She picked a day when Janelle would be home. She asked to watch the kids. She sent Janelle's partner, Aaron, to the convenience store for milk and bread. There is a version of this story that asks us to view Taryn through a diagnostic lens. There were reports in her file, depressive episodes, impulses that scared her family, grades that plummeted once the rules got complicated. Later, 2 forensic psychiatrists would disagree on the axis that mattered most: fit to stand trial versus insanity at the time of the offense. Courts are not designed to cure. They are designed to decide, and they did. None of the paperwork resurrects anyone. It simply maps the space where responsibility and explanation eye each other uneasily across a table. The interview that changed the clock. When detectives turned the conversation back to the children, Taryn stared at the recorder like it might repeat the question for her. Then she told a story that, if you're listening late at night, you might decide to pause and finish in the morning. She said that 2 days after the bathroom, she returned to the apartment and took Janelle's children for a bath at Auntie's. She said the words as if they were an errand. She said she wanted them to be clean and calm. She said, "Stop. This is where the narrative must step back." Detective Ellison did not step back. She leaned forward and asked the only good question left: why? Taryn's answer changed 6 times in as many minutes. The truth wrapped around the simplest of all motives: concealment. She'd committed one crime that could not remain invisible. To keep it from being seen, she committed 3 more. She told it that way, without using the words. The tape recorder captured them anyway. The case you build when you don't want to be here. Prosecutors don't like to rely on confessions because juries and defense attorneys have learned to distrust them. So the district attorney ordered the kind of case that can stand without a voice in the room. Hospital records. Taryn's refusal of an exam documented contemporaneously. No birth trauma, no postpartum signs. A baby whose body told a different timeline than the one she'd narrated. Funeral home logs, her lateness, her request to move the service. The presence of Keith, the reservist, tying motive to deception. receipts, bulb syringe, alcohol, scissors, purchased within a week of the crime, digital traces, search queries on a borrowed phone about preemie survival and how to stop bleeding fast. The queries were incomplete, as if interrupted by a knock at a door. Forensics, tape residue consistent with the brand in Janelle's pantry, fibers that didn't belong to the apartment's usual laundry, partial prints on the washer lid and dryer door that could be Taryn's and, just as importantly, weren't anyone else's who lived there. Witness statements. A neighbor saw Taryn leave Janelle's unit carrying a laundry basket the week the kids were last seen. Another neighbor heard water running at odd hours through shared pipes. Keith testified to the conversation in the funeral home lot. He did not try to be the hero. He said he had been fooled, and then he had done the only thing there was time to do. Aaron testified to the routines that had briefly given his life a reliable shape. The bus stop at 7:12, the green tractor, the way Janelle smiled when their toddler tried to carry too many wooden blocks at once. A good prosecutor knows how to compose a portrait without turning a grieving person into a prop. The assistant DA, Angela Reese, did her best. Court, the place where the story stops changing. Taryn's attorneys filed for a psychiatric evaluation. The reports came back with phrases that never feel restful: long history, multiple hospitalizations, limited insight, inconsistent adherence to treatment. The doctors agreed on one thing: she was competent to stand trial. On the question of her sanity at the time of the offense, they diverged. The judge ruled that the case could proceed. Facing 5 counts of first-degree murder, Janelle, her unborn daughter, and 3 children, Taryn entered a guilty plea to avoid the death penalty. The court accepted the plea. The sentence was life without the possibility of parole. In a different timeline, a jury would have deliberated for days, and a verdict would have been read out loud in a room that doesn't have enough oxygen in it. In hours, the decision arrived in a handful of minutes during a hearing that felt like an eclipse. Taryn said guilty 5 times. The word shrank each time she said it, as if the syllables knew they were not built to carry this weight. Later, appeals would be filed on procedural grounds. Reports were stamped received after the plea, not before. The argument was that the court should have waited for a second opinion. Appellate judges wrote about calendars and standards and whether justice can be reheated. Remands were considered. Relief was denied. The sentence held. What the city did, because cities try. A funeral for Janelle and her children filled a church that had never needed overflow seating. People donated beyond what the funerals cost, and then kept donating, because it felt like the only action that pushed back against what had happened. A playground near Fletcher Court got a new coat of paint and a sign with 4 names written at child height. A community college photography program set aside a scholarship in Janelle's name. 1 portfolio a year, tuition covered, gear paid for, mentorship guaranteed. The first recipients shot black and white portraits of grandparents with their grandkids sitting on laps like they had been there forever. In a quiet corner of East Glen, a caseworker typed up a memo that would be quoted in a training many months later. A reunification that fails is not, in itself, proof of failure. It's a risk model that needs work. It wasn't a satisfying sentence. It was an honest one. Detective Ellison stopped by the memorial sometimes on her way home and sat on the bench that had been placed under a tree that did actual shade. Not the thin kind you get when branches are stingy. She never stayed long. She didn't think lingering made her better at her job, but she believed in showing up where names were carved, just often enough to remind herself why paper should be neat and swift. What we don't do. It would be easy to place Taryn in a box labelled evil and slide it onto a shelf so we don't have to think about how boxes are made. It would be easy too to look at Janelle's trust and call it naive. Neither would be true. Janelle did what most of us do when we are tired and building something. She relied on the person who had shown up before. Taryn did what some people do when fear and deception become a self-licking ice cream cone. She escalated to keep yesterday's lie from being exposed today. A mind can be both unwell and accountable. A system can be both well-intentioned and insufficient. Communities can be both strong and, in a single night, broken open. There are lessons here, if lessons help you sleep. If a friend says she's had a medical emergency and declines any medical care, that is a red flag worth naming out loud. If someone you love is telling a story that changes shape whenever you touch it, step back, then step toward help. And if you are a neighbor who notices the small patterns, the porch light that stays off, the bus stop routine that blinks, don't talk yourself out of a welfare check. Closing the file. The official case file for State v. Hale is thick. It is also, in a way, thin. So many pages, and none of them answer the question people ask most at the end of episodes like this. Why? Not the list of reasons. The true why. The one that would let us tuck this away and not imagine it happening again somewhere else. The best we can do is hold the shape of the story honestly. Two girls on the same street. One steady, one struggling. A lie that grew teeth. A hospital that did its job and still couldn't stop what had already happened. A detective who kept her notes neat so a prosecutor wouldn't fumble them later. A judge who said life in a room where the word doesn't mean what it used to mean. A community that painted a playground and sat on a new bench and remembered 4 names at child height. If you stayed with me through this, thank you. If you want more slow burn, true crime told quietly and with care, please subscribe, tap like, and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I read every comment. Sleep safely.
Case closed. Archived in the synthetic vault. If you dare to return, the next file awaits. truecrime.exe. The line between fiction and fear.